Hello, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the ministry series tonight. My name is Zach, and I am a current graduate student at the University of Georgia. I graduated from undergrad back in 2018 and was with the club for all 4 years. Had a blast, and I'm so happy to be with you all tonight. So let's jump right in. So the overall topic of this ministry series for the last week and the coming weeks is the all-inclusive, extensive Christ, replacing culture for the one new man. And I'll just give a brief review of last week, then we'll jump into today's topic and have some applications along the way, how it applies to us. So as a review, I wasn't there last week, so I'm not sure what got shared, but I just wanted to briefly give a background of what's going on here. So we're in the book of Colossians. This book was written with the background of, culture was invading the church. And I believe you might have talked about it last week, that culture is actually a substitute for God, and it replaces God to us. We saw this in Genesis. When man was left the garden, he lost God, and when he lost God, he lost everything, and was forced to come up with his own culture, his own way of living. And so that was kind of on the negative side. But in the positive side, today with us, God is desiring to recover this way of Christ being everything to us. And so this is the background of the book of Colossians as well. Paul wrote this when there was things such as Hebrew religion, Greek philosophy, asceticism, mysticism, Gnosticism. All these elements of culture were pervading the age at that time. And sure enough, these elements started coming into the church in a negative way and started to replace Christ. So we know that the church should be a house filled with Christ and constituted with him. But what was happening in Colossae is, the culture, the church was being invaded by culture. And so to a large extent, Christ as the unique element of the church was being replaced by these various aspects of mixed culture. And so in that sense, church culture is negative as a replacement of Christ. But I think it's important to point out that culture is not bad necessarily. I don't want to harp on culture, but I need to clarify that God uses culture to preserve people until they receive Christ. So it's actually very useful to God, culture is. And so an example is, I'll just give my example, or use myself as an example, is that growing up, I needed culture. I needed to be trained and told and taught how to honor my parents, how to love others, how to share my possessions, how to be a good citizen. This was my culture. This was my upbringing. And so when I received Christ, what this actually turned into was a replacement of him. Christ, as believers, when we receive Christ, he wants to be absolutely everything to us. And so when we have other things that we live by, that's just a replacement of Christ. And so culture is not bad, but we just need to appreciate Christ more. We need to appreciate our culture less, but see a vision of Christ. And this is exactly what Paul was doing when writing the book of Colossians. He wrote 4 chapters. Well, he wrote this book of an amazing picture of this all-inclusive, extensive Christ. And I highly recommend just reading this book again and seeing how wonderful this Christ is. And so what Paul was doing, his strategy was not to address the negative aspects of culture. You won't see him talk a lot about those in this book, but he just presents Christ in a magnificent way. And actually in Colossians, it's the highest revelation of Christ in the Bible. So he was showing something to contrast what the believers thought was valuable. They were holding on to these elements of culture. They were boasting. They were being led astray. And Paul was warning them. He said, beware of this culture that's coming into the church life. But I will show you something much better, this all-inclusive existence of Christ. So that was kind of a huge burden I have tonight. A point I want to emphasize is that, when it comes to Christ replacing our culture, we shouldn't just drop it. And apart from a vision of Christ, we need to see Christ. Just as Paul was giving a vision of Christ in writing Colossians, we need to be impressed with the vision of Christ and that our culture replaces him. And so what does this look like? So just jumping into, what does this look like in our daily life? I love this. The Bible is written for the believers, or the New Testament. The New Testament was written for us today to experience Christ. So how do we live Christ for the one new man instead of our culture? Well, I like this quote from Charles Spurgeon. You might have heard of him. He's a Christian author from many years ago, and he said this: "I always feel it well to put a few words of prayer between everything I do." Wow, that is awesome, because this really points to how we need to live as believers. That everything we do should be filled with Christ. Like I said, Christ wants to be everything to us. That's what he's recovering today. And so a practical way to experience this is to just pray to the Lord before you do anything. This week I prayed, Lord, should I buy this? I wanted to buy something. Normally my culture, my upbringing, I just consider my bank account. Do I have the money? Is it something I want? Okay, I'll buy it. But what Christ wants is for me to experience him in that situation. And so what I did, starting to learn to do is just to ask the Lord, should I buy this? Lord, should I say this? Lord, what do you want to do? And so this is, I think, a real practical way to experience Christ in this way. And this is exactly what Paul was experiencing as well. When we do this, when we open and speak to the Lord through prayer, through spending time with him, we are filled, saturated, permeated, we're clothed with Christ, so that we live him. And Paul wrote about this in all his epistles, and he said things such as, even now Christ will be magnified in my body, and to me to live is Christ. So he spoke of living Christ and Christ being magnified in his living. And then he also was burdened for the believers, saying that Christ would make his home in their heart. And then he also said he travails in birth until Christ is formed in you. Paul wanted the saints and endeavored and prayed and surely spoke to the saints, the believers, to be filled with Christ, to be filled with this all-inclusive one, so that they could live him instead of their culture. And so it's the same for us. We need to experience Christ. We need to be filled with him. How do we get filled with Christ? We need to spend time with him. This comes up again and again, spending time with the Lord day by day. I think in college, this is when it hit home for me that I need to spend time with the Lord daily. But it wasn't until recently that I realized, for me, just thinking about spending time with the Lord doesn't mean I will spend time with the Lord. I have to schedule it. I have to put it on my calendar. I need to physically see it somewhere as a reminder to spend time with the Lord. And so I put this on my schedule. I put, the first few minutes when I get up, 20 minutes. I just give to the Lord. I use that time to get filled up, to pray, to read the word. And when this happens, we get filled up. And it's key that, I mentioned, we don't just try to drop our culture, but what happens is we get filled with Christ, then spontaneously we live Christ, and we drop our culture. So it's something spontaneous. It's not something we have to try to do, but what we need to do is spend time with the Lord to get filled with him. And even the Lord, he spent much time in prayer with the Father while he was on earth. You just read in the New Testament, in the Gospels, he was always praying to the Father. And, surely he was one with the Father, but I believe he was getting filled with the Father to live him. He spent time with the Father. So same with us. We need to spend time with the Lord. And going back to having a schedule, we need to have a Bible reading schedule. I know there's a club reading schedule. That's the best thing you could possibly do as a college student, is to read the Bible in a scheduled way. Because when we read the Word, in Colossians, Paul says, in this book of Christ, he said, let the word of Christ dwell in you richly. This means that when we read the Word, we get filled up with God. And then, like I said, spontaneously, we live God when we're filled with Him. And so this accomplishes God's purpose. This spending time with the Lord, this getting filled up with Him, this is what causes us to live Christ for the one new man. And spontaneously, we don't live by our culture. I'm still learning this, and I think it's great that you can hear this as a college student and learn to incorporate this into your daily life. I wish I did sooner. And I'm wrapping up here. It's coming just over 10 minutes. So I just want to say one more thing, something that was kind of on my heart a little bit about this. We're talking about the one new man, and this is just an aspect. What is the one new man? It's a further and it's a deeper aspect of the body of Christ that is mentioned in the Word, and Paul says in Colossians 3:11 regarding the one new man, that in the one new man there cannot be Jew, there cannot be Greek, there cannot be circumcision, uncircumcision, barbarian, Scythian, slave, free man, but Christ. So in the one new man is just Christ. Christ is all and in all. So as believers, when we're filled up with Christ, all these things I just listed in this verse, these are just elements of culture, different types of nationalities, races, different social statuses, all these things, these divisive things, don't matter in the one new man. It's just Christ. And so in light of, today in the United States and all over the world, this matter of divisiveness, you just see the divisiveness, the differences among the races, the social classes, the nationalities, the countries. There's just divisiveness. But there's a longing, you can see it in many people. They just desire for unity. They desire oneness. Martin Luther King, this was his message of unity, bringing people together. This was, I watched the inauguration. This was that same message, unity. This is what people want. This is what people respond to, because of course, this is in line with God's purpose. God created us and we match our Creator, and He desires the one new man. And surely we desire the one new man. This is what everyone longs for. And so this is why it's so important. We need to have Christ replace our culture, and not the other way around, have culture replace Christ. And so we have to be those getting filled up with God. I believe this is the best way to display to those on earth, all around us, the real unity, the real oneness, is to take care of our being filled up with God. Because when we get filled up with God, we live Christ. And when we live Christ, we are the one new man. This is when millions of people, or many people, are living Christ together. There is real unity, and this is what people want, and are desiring. They want this reality. And so, there's many causes for oneness, for unity, and those are very, very noble causes. But as believers, what is our cause? Our cause is for God's purpose. We want, we're for Christ, and we want Him to be lived out of us. This is what we want. And then out of this is the one new man. And so may all of us be those who are filled with Christ, so that we live Christ for the one new man.